Good morning. Sichah we're going to be learning today is in Chelef Chav Beis, volume 22, Bhar, Sichah Aleph. Hayvim posik v'shav sa'aretz Shabbos la'Hashem ad b'shana hashvis darf die Erde ruin mitornit ton kein melacha hasada v'akerem. In regards to this week's parsha, when the Torah says that the land shall rest for Shabbos for Hashem, which teaches us that the land must rest in the seventh year. All work in the field and the vineyard is also. Bring the Zer the Posik. So the Zer brings the Posik, Kisikne Eved Ibri Sheishanam Yavid, Uvashvis Yetela Chofshichinam. So the Zer brings the Posik when it says, when you buy a Eved Ivri, a Hebrew slave, so you shall work for 6 years. And then the Torah says that in the seventh year you shall go out for free. Was zogt the Chol Bar Yisrael Isli Naicha B'Shmita. The Zer says that for every Yid has a rest period during Shmita. Ba'u Naicha Da'ara Istrichu Avdi Naicha. In dem Ruin von dem Erd darf euch die Knecht ruin, aber gam keine B'Shmis. So the Zer says that, which means in the resting period of the land, the workers must rest. During the rest period of the land, the workers also need to rest. And therefore it says, in the seventh and in the seventh. Now, what does the Zer mean? So the Rebbe explains. But Pasha Zedes, as the Zer led them pshat in Ubashvis, Yetzel Achav Shechinam, as das meint, nicht dem 17 Jahr von wenn is geworden an Even, nor Shnas HaShlita. When you learn the Zer, we understand it that in the seventh he shall go out without paying anything. It's referring to not to the seventh year of a servant's service, but rather the year of Shemitah. So the Rebbe asks, the first Mass is about Vustetimiya. It's known, the question, is ha'alocha ravoches bekam mekimis b'chazal. As an Eved geht reis nicht b'shnas hashmita nur b'shvis l'mechira. Tov, wie sagt der Zer, ba'ahu neicha da'aro istruchu avdi neicha. So the question is, we know how halacha and Chazal say, and everybody knows, that a servant goes free not in the year of Shemitah, but in the seventh year from when he was sold. So how could the Zer say that in the resting period of the land, the workers also have to rest? Und es ist nicht mistaber zu sagen, als der Zer ist mucholik mit die alle Mamorei Chazal, but neither the Torah. And it's not so mistaber to say that the Zer disputes all of what Chazal say. So basically, what we said in Aleph is, the Torah says, V'shav sa'or is Shabbos la'Hashem, which means that in the seventh year, we know we have to now work the field and the vineyard. And the Zer says that when the Torah says Kisikna Eved Ivri Sheishanam Yavid Uvashvis Achav Shechinam, so the Zer says that when there's Shemitah, in the year of Shemitah, that's when the servants have to rest. Which comes out from the Zer Bashvi Yetzel Achav Shechinam means that not the seventh year of when he was sold, but in the seventh year, the Shnas Shemitah. So the question is, we know that this word of Kisikna Eved Ivri Sheishanam Yavid Vashvich Yetzel Achav Shechinam, everybody knows it's not going on the year of Shemitah, but rather it's 7 years from when he was sold. That's when he goes free. So the Rebbe says like this in base. But man das verstehen behecktem, was mir gefehlt benegert zu Mitzvahs, als es voran akiyam a Mitzvah in an Eifel von Lechatchilo, und voran akiyam a Mitzvah blois in an Eifel for the B'yevad. Understand this, my first prefacing, with regards to a Mitzvah, it's a Mitzvah that can be performed Lechatchilo. In other words, Lechatchilo, that's the way it should be done. And then you have sometimes mitzvahs that it's after the fact, then it's fine. And it's brought down from the Likkutei from a Yosef angle. He brings out as a derech chiluk from Lechatchilo B'diavad is fran afilu by Yonah Deiraisa, that this idea of between the Chatchila and B'diavad also pertains to the Eraisidik Inyanim. Or noch very even more so. Nicht nur wenn ich zu Azelcho Protim von der Mitzvah, was einem bloß a Tonight Study, was dem wollt kämen verstehen. As a viele, wenn es fällt, oder Tanai hat mir kein gewinnt die Mitzvah. Akapone B'diavad, she explains that not only does this apply to parts of a mitzvah that are of secondary importance, and then it's understood that even with this particular detail, the mitzvah is fulfilled with the Eved. He says, nor seine Farana fallen, was der Prat is in Guf Inyan mitzvah. Ralph Bekin is das nicht a Treili Kuva, was Mekai the mitzvah with the Eved, oich hat dem Prat. Wie mir bringt der Ruf kam, bekam mit der Gmois, weil wo der Kolel dem Klau, bei Yannick Kotschim, Shana Kos, so all of Akif. So he says like this. The basic Engel explains that this idea of Lechatchila B'diavad also pertains to Deiraisa. And he says not only does this apply to parts of a mitzvah that are secondary importance, and then it's understood that even without this particular detail, the mitzvah is fulfilled B'diavad, but rather there are instances where the missing detail is part of the makeup of the mitzvah itself. Nevertheless, this detail isn't like indispensable, and the mitzvah can be performed by the Eved even without it. And he gives an example, and like the architect in this halacha, he says that the Torah repeats a command to teach that it's mamish indispensable. But had it not been repeated, it would have been acceptable. He explains like this. Gimel. Leit den Klau, euch verämpfen, kam jemand zu mir, was einigen von sie wollen da weiter gebracht in das Barber. Based on this rule, many questions can be explained, one of which is discussed further on. Ulo for example, von an Inyan should be Yom of Elu, tell us, like we have a timely obligation. What we're doing now is by spheres aimer, Dr. Pasuk was fardim lachem, v'mochanas Shabbos. And certainly the aimer, the Torah says, you shall count for yourself on the day after Shabbos. Let's make a pashas yom Shabbos. Or we did stukim by Tushel Zagan, as atzeres achar Shabbos. As behekel tzelin svira for the mochanas yom Shabbos. But the Torah Shabbat Peh is mefarish as mochanas Shabbos made mochanas yom tiv. Chazal bring the rule, kamer rayas within them. The Torah says, you count for yourself, now, when we say the day after Shabbos, this refers to the day after Shabbos, Sunday. As the Baitusim said, that Shavuos always falls on Sunday. And counting the Omer begins from the day after Shabbos. However, we know that Mitzat Torah Shabbat Peh, they explain that it means the day after Yom Tov, in other words, the first day of Pesach. As Chazal bring many rayas to this idea that Sir starts, we know, the second day after Pesach. So the Rebbe says like this: it's perplexing, it's puzzling. Baal Teda vil mizol only mitzel sir machas Yom Tov to Pesach halamai zok Teda machas Shabbos was kita lamakim lites. Since the Torah wants us to understand that when we say counting means the first day after Pesach, why does the Torah say B'mochas HaShabbos? And then I'm going to have to start, there's room for error, and maybe it means the day after Shabbos or Sunday. Just say clearly B'mochas HaPesach. So the Rebbe says, Al pi anal kem das masber sein ubehekta. Now, based on the above, we can explain like this. Shem v'yisfarana achiluk, von lachatchila b'diavad mitzadam kiyim ma'adam, as when farfelt tzutana prat she'inem akib, is makayim mitzvah b'diavad, adel zeh is da amol achiluk mitzadam mitzvah atzma, as in gewisse matzavim, is a mitzvah mit mershlemus, und es ist da a matzav, was die mitzvah zum lachatchila ausgestellt, in einer Eifen, as in dem matzav, tut man die mitzvah nicht mershlemus. Es fällt dabei, einige Pratim. So he says this. Based on what we said from a basic angle, that there's a chiluk between the chatchila and b'diavad, and it exists from the perspective of the one performing the mitzvah. In other words, that when he, let's say, neglects a particular, not an essential detail in the mitzvah, it's acceptable b'diavad. Similarly, the same distinction can be made sometimes in not only the person being mekayim the mitzvah, but also the mitzvah itself. In certain circumstances, a mitzvah can be performed in a halachic form, and sometimes the mitzvah l'chatchila is set up such that in a particular circumstance, it's performed not b'shleimus. It's missing a few parts of the detail. And the Rebbe says this. From the Gemara Sachi Pshutus is that. What's a very, very simple example? Is Yom Tov verbunden mit Hakravas Karbonas. Karbonas Yom Tov Shetziber, und Sheyachal Elishadiyah, V'Shamei Chagiga, Shechar Beis Midrash, hat in dem Yom Tov Menateda. Aber all die Karbonas, weil der Zeb is manche Beis Midrash Yekayim, is Mishul Lehoyele Karka Potter von Alil Regel. Und Mele Euch von die Karbonas Yachal danal, Afal was hat dem Yom Tov Menateda. One of the examples he explains that during the Beis Midrash, Yom Tovim were associated with offering karbonas. You had the communal carbon, you had the personal, you had the Shriya, the Shamis Hagig, etc. And after the destruction of the Beis Midrash, the Yom Tov is still observed Midei Raisa, both at the karbonas and there's as much Beis Midrash, and the same thing during the Beis Midrash, a person that didn't own land was not required to be in the regal. And therefore, by extension, he's not chayiv even for personal karbonos, even though the Yom Tov is midei raisa. Okamuvan, zayn di karbonos Yom Tov, but there's a degree for alil l'regel. Nit as sadik in Yom Tov, the same as Yishleim, the karbonos zayn nit amasuv for Yom Tov, nor is zayn achelek al karbonos meisafa Yishleim is being gufa. Now, obviously, the Yom Tov karbonos and similarly Eilis Shadira they're not a secondary importance. And these karbonos were not also a consequence of the Yom Tov. The karbonos are an integral part, at least part of the Yom Tov itself. Now, alpha began, it says amatziv azmin ken al pitera. The karbonos didn't bring in because the Yom Tov kedusha Yom Tov minatera. Nevertheless, in a situation like we are now, where according to the Torah a person cannot bring these karbonos, nevertheless, the Yom Tov and its holiness remain midei raisa. Meaning, furthermore, we also find, as is eine Faran, mitzvahs and melachachila gegeben geworden an Leifen, as is Faran in the mitzvah tzveizman. We find that some mitzvahs were the chachila given with two prescribed time periods. And ein Zman is zi Faran b'shleimusa, chol pratim, und a zweite Zman had niti b'shleimus. That you find the mitzvah is found in one instance in a complete form, in all its detail, and the second time it's incomplete. Dugma, for example, Yom Tov for Chol HaMeid Shalei. Chol HaMeid is a tel from Yom Tov, as B'chal from Meidin L'Simcha, Mitzad Zeh, Melchuye B'Simcha Menateda. We find that, for example, Yom Tov and Chol HaMeid is part of the Yom Tov, and it's included in the Yom Tov of joy. That's what the Torah says on Chol HaMeid, V'samachta B'chelkecha. Af al pi kein, kommt es nicht zu Yimei Yom Tov Atzmi, was damals das Yom Tov to Katog mit der ganzen Schlimmes B'chol HaProtim. Nevertheless, Chol HaMeid is not the same level as Yom Tov, a holiday in the fullest sense and with all its detail. Now, Dalit, based on this, you never say all this. Based on this, we could say this regarding Sir Samer. Das was Teda sagt, was Svartum Lachem Mimochos HaShabbos. This is the Teda says that it should be on the day Mimochos HaShabbos. Aber bei der Mitzvah is to tell in Mimochos Yom Tov. It says, well, in Akvias, when Yom Tov falt Eis B'yem HaShabbos, when it hate on sale Sfira Eis Mimochos Yom HaShabbos, is this like B'yem HaChazal, Aggressive Shleimus Nina Sfira Chilkamon Sif Hei Baruch. Now, we asked before, why not say Mimochos Yom Tov? Why do you say Mimochos Shabbos? Because according to Chazal, in a year, when Pesach falls on a Shabbos, and so the counting begins, Mimochos Shabbos, this, when it's Taka Mimochos Shabbos, it brings to greater perfection to the Sfira, as we're going to explain in Sifhei. What does that mean? As the mitzvah for Sfira is Menachatchila Gigemen Gevorn in Sfira Fanim, which means you see the Teda, the mitzvah of counting the Eimer from the outset was given by the Teda to observe, and it can happen in two ways. You have the Etzem mitzvah for the Sfira, versus Ma'aki B'di Evet, Muz Zayin and get the Sfira in Vasfar Akvias as only Zayin, is it to Tzela Mimokras Hayamtiv, when it's Faran Akvias, Kishachol B'Shabbos B'Yem HaShabbos, when the mitzvah for the Sfira is Mer Shleimus. So he says like this. The mitzvah, you have the core of the mitzvah is observed, regardless of the day of which the first day of Pesach falls. So you have that Mimorchas HaYamtiv. And then you have the flawless mitzvah of Kaddish Sirius Eimer is observed when the beginning of Pesach coincides with Shabbos. On was steht in Torah Shebechsam Machzor Shabbos, das is the mitzvah b'chol shlemus. Why does the Torah say Taka b'yem Shabbos? Is because when you have this alignment of the mitzvah, then you have it in the shlemus to go away. Hey, die Reihe war es Bhar bezevet verstehen von der Medrash Tamur from Pesach L'Shvat L'Chil Machzor Shabbos. Now, proof and explanation to this could be understood by introducing a Medrash Plio, a wondrous Medrash. The Medrash says, the Torah says you shall count for yourself, Mimorchos HaShabbos, this is the, so the Medrash says, Ksiv, Sheva Shabbosis Tmimis Tiyena. Amos Ahin Tmimis, Bizman, Shein Yeshua, says, when it says that it shall be 7 complete weeks. So the Medrash says, when are they complete? When Yeshai and Shechna are not amongst them. That's what it says. When Yeshai and Shechna are not amongst them. Now, what does that mean? Before Shemzan and Bhar, as this made, is much to say from Rachas and Shabbos, which quickly for the on. And the Medrash explains, the commentators explain that this refers to when you have the alignment, when the counting begins, mamish from Sunday. But the Medrash Gita Simen of them Kfiyas when Pesach fallen is Shabbos. As the Mishmar is Yeshua, or Yeshu, V'shechna, V'nit Kiton, Kinaveda, V'midrash Bein Pesach, that says. The Medrash brings a raya, when the Pesach falls out on Shabbos, when the Mishmaris of Yeshua and Shechna didn't serve in the Beis HaMikdash between Pesach and Shavuos. And Mehedon Tzelem, Sfir B'motzei Shabbos, B'machas HaShabbos, Shepshutei. When Heina Shabbos is Tmimis, Keshishis and Iberishis, and Yav Yeshua Lo Yeh Tmimis. So, when the counting of the Eimer begins on Motzei Shabbos, in other words, the day on Sunday, then the weeks will be complete, and this aligns with the 6 days of creation. And if Yeshua comes during this time, they will not be complete.
You'll operate on Yeshua Shachna. What's the story there?
Yeah, so he says like this. He says,
not Prisco. We're going to at the body.
Okay, so it doesn't really explain. It doesn't really. Yeah, I'm just saying. It doesn't really explain over here. I didn't look it up, but in it brings from the Likkutei Sichos and Chelik. I'll look it up later. In the Likkutei Sichos Chelik Yud Beis, explains more on page 102. What's this? What's one of the names of Yeshua and Shechna? It doesn't explain. It doesn't elaborate over here. But
in reference to us, Josh's, that it came up in the month of Shabbos, actual Shabbos, but then more of a shlemus.
Yeah. That's his point, Bhar. The point is that in the Chatchila, when the way the Eibusher set up a mitzvah, you have the way that the mitzvah is done b'shleimus. That is when the spheres of Eimer falls out on a Sunday, or when you start counting as much as Shabbos, and then you have like a b'diavad way of doing the mitzvah. That's when it doesn't really fall on Menachos or Shabbos. Okay, let's finish. 1 second. Okay, let's some more. Der Chiyavim for Tmimis is B'chol Shana Mishana. But yet the Kviyas for Stefar and Shach Lisper Shuv and Nevarach Suris Emer is better for Vozot the Medrash as the Inyan for Tmimis is Davkiv and Pesach is Chol B'Shabbos. So the question is like this: the obligation to count, this concept of complete, applies every year, regardless of when Menachos Shabbos is. And therefore, if a person forgets to count, he can no longer make a bracha. Why? Because his counting is not complete. Also, the counting of the Emer can only be done at night. Why? Because you want to make sure that it's the day's completeness. So why does the Medrash say that the best for the count to be complete is only fulfilled when Pesach falls on Shabbos, and therefore the first day you're counting is Matzah Shabbos? It's the beer in them. The explanation is like this: is man as mat Shabbos is tmimis sheshes miberishes is das tmimis b'shteimus. Nor a di shleimus is not mak b'devid. Tmimis likuva is mem tesim. Aber shleimus in an Indian a tmimis is when it is tmimis k'sheshes miberishes. Pesach shechol b'shabbos. Now we have complete weeks. That's aligned with the days of creation. It's complete in the fullest sense, but this completeness isn't essential in all the circumstances b'diavad. In other words, this is complete is to count all 49 days. But the completeness happens when there are complete weeks aligned with the days of creation. In other words, when Pesach falls out on Shabbos. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Have a good day.
Okay.